Okay, Chelsea versus Nottingham Forest. Let's get into a little tactical review. We're not going to have the webcam today as, again, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but I did want to get this out on Monday just to sort of speak about a few different things because I think there were some interesting tweaks in this game from Maresca from the first half to the second half, in order to get Chelsea in this game, secure the 3 points, and I think it's something we need to talk about and sort of give the credit to him for that. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. This is how Chelsea set up on paper. You had the back four. You had Cucurella and James as the fullbacks. You had Reece at right back. You had Malo Gusto in central midfield with Andre Santos, Lavia at the base. You had no Caicedo and no Enzo Fernandez. Instantly, alarm bells slightly ringing because Caicedo especially been so important. I think it was something like hadn't not started since 2023 in a Premier League match. There was some sort of stat to do with it, and it's already sort of jogged my memory. But that was sort of a key context going into this game, having those two midfielders out. Now, the big one for me, and we're going to speak about it, is, of course, Trevor Chalobah starting left centre-back in that first half. And, of course, he played the entire game there, but we spoke about it in sort of the preview, saying that Badiashile had got injured. And it is such a key factor with Badiashile now being injured when we're trying to play this similar sort of build-up shape now, where we almost go into this 2-3, but also we was very aggressive in this game. I think what Maresca was expecting was Forest to sort of almost default to more of a 5-4-1, in matter of fact, which would allow Chelsea to sort of have the 2v1 in that first line, allow James and Lavia to sort of play in here, Cucurella to push on, and almost to create this sort of 6 so that we could properly get at their last line in that sense. However, what happened more often is Forest are trying to go man for man, and they were using Trevor Chalobah being on his wrong side as a bit more of a pressing trigger, and that started from the get-go. From goal kicks, very, very aggressive in the sense of they wanted to sort of press man for man. Again, he's arcing his run to make sure Sanchez has to go to this side. And then from here, they're going to go man for man and really look to trap Chelsea on this side of the pitch. Nico Williams was jumping high on Cucurella. Milinkovic, from that sort of right centre-back role, was drifting over to Marc. And they were going man for man from that point onwards. Again, when you got to this point and Chalobah was on the ball, as we spoke about when he played there against Palace earlier in the season, what he finds difficult to do is sort of get the ball on his left foot and really access these spaces to either find Lavia's feet, find that ball between the lines, or even sort of find that pass into Garnacho with a little bit more incisiveness, because if he's doing it on his right foot, it's obviously coming from his right and the angle isn't ideal, and it makes it a little bit easier for one of the Forest players to sort of jump out and intercept it. So this was, again, a bit of a trigger for them to go man for man, force Chelsea back instead of being able to sort of play either through into this area where James has got a little bit of space there, or into Lavia's feet where he can maybe bounce it inside to Reece and play forwards. What was instead happening is this was their trigger to go a little bit more direct man for man and force Chelsea back to Sanchez, where Sanchez would then often kick it long and allow that sort of back five, a very physical back five of Nottingham Forest, to regain possession in that way instead. Here's another example here. Again, they're sort of getting ready. Chelsea, in this sense, when they're a little bit deeper, of course, actually have that sort of 3 on the ball here. And then you've got Lavia in here. So you've got the 2. It's essentially that 2-3 like we spoke about. But again, they're looking to, they just don't want it to come to this side of the pitch. Give it to Chalobah. And then from there, they're going to press man for man. They're going to go, Nico Williams is going to push on. And they're going to look to force Chelsea to go long and sort of regain possession off of that. So what was often happening is Trevor Chalobah was sort of that pressing trigger, and it caused Chelsea quite a few issues in that first half. Now, as I sort of said, we was almost looking to go in that 2-2-5-1 to try and overload them in all aspects of the pitch. But instead, where they would press man for man on the 2 centre-backs, and then they would sort of jump out and have Elliot Anderson maybe going to Reece James, and I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Douglas Luiz, of course, going on to Lavia. Then what you'd have is these players between the lines, and often what's happening is Santos was pinning Sangare. So what it was is almost a 5-3-2. these two players would jump up a little bit onto these two. Zangaro is pinned by Santos. So Cucurella and Gusto were sort of the three men in this scenario. Now, what I don't think Chelsea did enough of, because I think they played in the first half too high up, and this is where one of the biggest tweaks comes into, is I think where they were trying to push these players on and be aggressive and sort of have these players in between the lines, they weren't finding these players as the spare men often enough, because if they did, these two sort of centre halves, but also at times it was, like I said, it was Williams sort of coming into here and then Milenkovic sort of shuffling over. But what they were unable to do, Chelsea, is find those pockets enough to force these centre-backs into sort of big issues and open up these spaces in behind. And this sort of caused issues in itself because it made it much easier for Forest to go man for man, because they weren't worried that Chelsea was sort of finding their way through into these pockets where they could essentially then have a 6v6 in this final third here against them. And I think that almost gave them confidence and momentum, and then a few turnovers started to happen, and it sort of fed into the crowd and the atmosphere, and all those things do have an effect on how the team is playing. Now, if we continue to sort of go through this, there's a situation where Lavia drops in, and I think this is a key, because what it was with Lavia dropping in is it's the correct thing to do, because what you're looking to do is overload that front two of Forest with a three at the back. Now, again, it was a little bit sloppy on the ball, caused an issue, and whilst there was an overload there and they were able to sort of play with time, they made a mistake, and it gives Forest that sort of chance from there. But it was the right intention to drop another man into that back line. Again, you can almost see it here. You've got that box press, essentially, from Forest here. Now, what's a little bit better, and what, again, we're going to speak about it in the second, from the second half changes, is you have Cucurella dropping deeper. And I think Cucurella dropping deeper to, instead of leaving it in that 2-2, where they're trying to press, because they're trying to go man for man, and they've got 4 players here in order to do so. But by dropping Cucurella deeper and having that 2-3 base rather than just the 2-2, you're able to overload that. And instead of going long, you can sort of use that to play a little bit more, play into Lavia's feet, open up the space, and use your +1 advantage rather than being forced to go long or go back to Sanchez. And this did work. Now, in the second half, we saw that even more. And we saw it, whether it was Cucurella or it was Joao Pedro, who was essentially playing in the Enzo Fernandez role, if you sort of like on the ball, in the sense of he went into the number 10, because the second half changes, right? Let's sort of like go over that, because I think these were so key to the game. And we're going to speak about the main man for me, Marc Guiu. So the subs were Garnacho came off for Gittins, Lavia came off for Casado, and then it was, who was it? Santos came off for Guiu. Pedro dropped in. So essentially what you had is, on the ball, this was the idea of, like, if you was to keep it the same, shape would be somewhat like this. However, like I said, the biggest change was dropping sort of somebody in, having these distances here so that you could not only overload this front press from Forest, but also now, if they do choose to go man for man still in this, so they push one onto here, they push a man onto Casado, they go man for man, and then they still decide Nico Williams to jump up on Gittins and sort of go over on Cucurella, and they shuffle over into a back 4. Now, all of a sudden, what you've got is you've still got Joao Pedro and Gusto between the lines. You've got Guiu, who is ready to sort of stretch the pitch and be a hassle in behind. So if they do force you to go long, Chelsea at this point, because they've forced another sort of defender, and this was either Nico Williams or at times even Milenkovic jumping big distances into here, which is something they're not comfortable doing. And the fact that they did that, Chelsea are now more happy to go direct and long, because 1, they've dragged out a defender, but 2, they've also got somebody on the other end who's actually more equipped to attack that first ball, be a nuisance. And if that's going to cause sort of that drift, where it's going to create space in here for someone like Joao Pedro, who's now playing a little bit deeper off the ball, Chelsea are going to deal with that, and they're going to be happy to, because now, if we're talking sort of probabilities of winning that ball, it's now sort of in Chelsea's favour a little bit more to attack off those second balls with this space in here and that drift between that front press and that back line of Forest. So if we look at it here, Joao Pedro is the one dropping in. But again, in this scenario, what you've got is you've still kind of got man for man. So if that ball does go long, like we said as well here, he's actually stood ahead of Cucurella, sort of to block that passing lane into Cucurella. So if you then do go long, like we said, you've got that advantage at the top end of the pitch. If we move it on slightly, Cucurella dropping in deeper here. Now, this is something that him and James, and I think this was part of the tactical tweak from Maresca at half-time, telling the defenders to drop in at times and be sort of cognizant of their positioning. Now, if one of them's a little bit higher, can the other one drop in to sort of make it that almost that 3v2 here to begin with and make it a little bit easier to bypass and almost make this player sort of wonder whether to jump or not. Because if this player's not going to jump as well, then it almost made Gibbs White, a lot of the time, he was then confused whether it's even worth him jumping onto Chalobah, because he's also got to watch sort of that. He's almost on two jobs, doing a hybrid role. So it made it a little bit easier for Chelsea to sort of build out from the back with either Cucurella or Cucurella staying a little bit higher and Reece James almost dropping in, sort of create a 3 at times, like a 3-1 rather than that 2-2. Just again to overload that front two and really find a way out a little bit easier before going a little bit more diagonal into the centre of the pitch. We see that here as an example with Cucurella dropping off and Chalobah actually attacking that space instead himself. We move it on again. Again, here you go. You got the 2-3 base instead of that sort of 2-2. Cucurella dropping in a little bit deeper to sort of be on that same line as those guys. Gittins is pinning him outside here. So then it's making it harder. You've got the front four for Forest. You've got 4 men trying to press, but they're going to overload that. You've got 5v4 in this first phase. And then if they do look to jump, that's when you can go over the top. So again, Chelsea already tuning up at this stage as well, a little bit more control. But I do think that the adjustments of the two fullbacks in this game and how they adjusted their heights on the ball, depending on the press, was very, very strong and very sort of something that was definitely sort of spoken about at half-time. Again, you can see it here, much, much deeper. Look here how far he's had to bring out Milenkovic to jump all the way out here. You got Sangare and Elliot Anderson deeper because they know they have to cover Joao Pedro if he's going to go into here. But you've got front 4 press here. And it's just Chelsea are in complete control of this scenario. They got the 5v4 in this first phase, and they've drawn somebody out, created that sort of drift between these two players, and you've got Guiu sort of occupying that last line, Pedro who can occupy that last line. It's just much better suited now that Guiu's on the pitch, and we're going to speak about how much of a difference he made. The last thing I sort of wanted to speak about is the note, of course, that got passed around that is making a lot of people sort of question what happened. I know Lloyd Canfield, brilliant journalist, top guy for The Sun, so go follow him on Twitter and all that good stuff if you haven't already. He spoke to Reece after the game and he said he couldn't tell him. So since that, I've sort of tried to watch it back and see what happened. I think it was just purely sort of trying to have more of a 3-3 instead of a 3-2 or like a 2-3, just to sort of keep that one on the last line. We're 2-0 up. It sort of protect that game. It could have had multiple things. It looks like it was passed around and there was lots of different notes, maybe lots of different notes for different players. Casado got a hold of it. Josh got a hold of it, who then was replaced by Tosin. Lots of different things maybe, but yeah, that was the main thing I sort of noticed, is more so of a little bit of a 3-3 base at times, almost that 3-3-4. Keep Joao Pedro up there a little bit closer to Guiu, who's off the picture here, and have that sort of 2 up top, ready to go a bit more direct if you need to later in the game. But now I wanted to speak about the impact, and like the last bit of this video is to speak about these two, because it's something that I said in the preview that we should do against back 5 teams. And I think we've seen exactly why today. And there's 2 reasons for it. One, what Guiu does, and one, what Pedro does. Okay. So by doing this, of course, what we've been saying the whole time is Guiu will occupy this last line. It will make them not want to step up because they know that Guiu's willing to run in behind. He is a nuisance. He will put his body about, he'll throw his weight around, and he will make it a game for these players. So he is instantly sort of keeping this back line in check himself. But also what you're doing is Chelsea, and this is something I said last season when we didn't have it. And I do think Joao Pedro can be this for Chelsea, but it's in certain games and it's in certain tactical scenarios that it suits him or suits us. And that is a central carrier. And the only player, like we had Carney Chukwuemeka, and sadly that didn't turn out to be how we wanted it to be. And it's something that I've said about Malo Gusto being in the middle of the park at times. Is something that he can offer. But again, we've seen, like, of course, he can make errors. And there is, like, other sort of caveats to his game. But he's probably the closest we've had to it in the last year of sort of being able to actually offer that mobility in the middle of the park and drive forwards when he does invert last season. But Joao Pedro, when he sort of drops in, plays in this number 10, and he can drop in almost as this left number 8 at times, like I say, dropping into this channel. This is within minutes. Look at this, like the 46th minute, right? 47th minute. This is where he picks up the ball, and he drives it all the way to this. He drives Chelsea up the pitch, and that's where we win the free kick, which then leads to the second phase of Guiu's goal. Not Guiu's goal, sorry, Acheampong's goal. The reason I said Guiu's goal is because I'm confused, because I'm about to talk about Guiu's effect for the goal. But again, this is part of it, is having Guiu occupy that last line and allow Joao Pedro to get the ball, have that space and drive forward and use that central carrying that Chelsea don't have enough of, sort of getting it in these areas and powering forwards. These are both aspects that having that partnership in here allows you to do. And it's from this that this stems. So the free kick was taken around here. They get the ball back. Neto gets the ball back on the left from the second phase of the set piece. Gets the ball, takes it down the line, whips it into the box. And it's this from Guiu darting across that near post. He knows that he might not even make contact, because if you actually watch it, he attacks it with so much sort of venom that, if anything, even if he did make contact with it, the likelihood of him sort of guiding it well is probably quite low. So he's going in there to create chaos, and he's going between these two defenders, which is going to drag those defenders away and allow Acheampong to basically have a free header here, which ends up being the opening goal, because you've got Chalobah here, he's pinning at the back post as well, ends up with Acheampong with that free header, and it puts Chelsea 1-0 up. Of course, Guiu also then won the free kick for the second goal. So you could see the impact that both of these two players had. And this is what I've been saying about sort of Guiu as an effective option until Delap's back, because it's a similar thing to what I said about Delap when you watch him against West Ham. The reason you want somebody up top who can sort of throw their weight around is because it makes life difficult for these defenders. And it makes it that when these secondary players are arriving behind, so whether it's the wingers or if it's like a fullback sort of bursting forward, or Enzo Fernandez when he's in that role, sort of attacking the box, when you have somebody in the box that defenders just, they don't know what to do with him, because he is constantly relentless and he's at it and he's making it a game for him. At times you'll have defenders, they don't know who's going to pick him up. Sometimes multiple will be drawn towards him to stop it, and then that leaves that space maybe behind him for these players to attack, whether it's, like I say, the midfielders, the wingers, the inverted fullbacks, whoever that be. And Joao Pedro that allows him to be that secondary attacker and arrive in that space and attack the ball best he can, get more shots and have more effectiveness from him. So I wanted to sort of just mention Guiu and that ability that he's offering. I do think he could start against Ajax. We're going to do a stream, I think, tomorrow, either tomorrow or Wednesday day. We'll do a stream to talk about maybe the Ajax team, what could happen in that game. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today. We'll pick things up again, ready for the Ajax game. 3 big points in an awkward fixture, a 12:30 kickoff. First game back after the international break against Nottingham Forest. We take the 3 points and we move on. So we've got Ajax this midweek for the Champions League and Sunderland at the weekend for the Prem. We'll have previews and reviews out this week for both games, so don't miss those. Drop a like. Please comment, subscribe, hype points, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one.